When I picked up the phone to ask my daughter Emily when her wedding would be, my soon-to-be son-in-law, Jason, looked me straight in the eye and said with that smug little smile, "We already got married yesterday. We only invited important people, important people." The words echoed in my head like a cruel joke. I had paid their rent every month for 3 years, T-bite like clockwork, bought their furniture, their appliances, filled their fridge when they were broke. I even covered Jason's business startup that turned out to be him flipping used laptops. I had done everything a father could do, and yet apparently I wasn't important enough to watch my daughter get married. The suit I bought for the wedding still hung in my closet, with the tie Emily said would look great in the pictures. Pictures I'd never see. I had even saved $ling to give them as a wedding gift. I imagined them standing in front of their guests, smiling, maybe even thanking me in a toast that would never exist. Instead, I stood alone in my living room, staring at the phone, realizing that for them I wasn't family, I was a bank account. A week later, Jason called again. His voice wasn't smug this time, it was shaky, forced calm. "Hey, Robert, the rent's due. The transfer didn't go through this month." For a few seconds, I said nothing. I thought about every bill I'd paid, every dinner I'd skipped, every time I'd swallowed my pride just to keep peace. Then, in a voice so steady it surprised even me, I said, "Yo, Jason, didn't I tell you? I only help important people now." Silence. The kind that slices deeper than shouting ever could. For the first time in years, it wasn't me left trembling, it was him. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by receipts and bank statements. I started doing the math I'd been avoiding for years: rent, groceries, car repairs, holidays, emergencies. It all added up to Sister U, Urbeck Basher's, $45,000 gone, not stolen by strangers, but willingly given to my own daughter and her husband, who treated me like a burden. I laughed, the kind of bitter laugh that sounds more like a cough. All those years I believed I was buying love. Turns out I'd only been renting it, and the lease just expired. The next morning, I went to the bank. The same clerk who'd seen me every month looked up, surprised, when I said I wanted to cancel all my automatic transfers. "You're stopping support for your daughter, mister." "Hi's the Navs, a stopping support, Lynn. You're stopping support for your daughter, mister." "He's?" "No," I said. "I'm stopping support for people who think I'm replaceable." Huh. When I got home, my phone had sure missed calls from Emily. I didn't call back. For the first time in a long time, the silence in my house felt peaceful, not empty. The next afternoon, I heard a car pull up in my driveway, Jason's beat-up sedan. I didn't even have to look through the window to know trouble had arrived. The doorbell rang 3 times before I opened it. Emily stood there, eyes red from crying, Jason behind her, trying to look calm. "Dad," she began, "why would you cancel the transfers without even telling us?" I leaned against the doorway. "Because I finally realized something, sweetheart. I was paying bills, not buying love." Jason stepped forward. "Robert, that's not fair. We depended on that money. You can't just pull it suddenly like that. We've got rent, loans," I said coldly. "Yeah. Or live within your means. I did it my whole life." Emily's voice trembled. "Dad, please. You're just angry." "You don't mean it." "I mean every word," I said. "You excluded me from your wedding, then remembered me when the bills came due. You made your priorities clear." Jason's tone changed. "Softer, but poisonous, Robert. You're clearly under a lot of stress. Maybe we should get you someone to talk to, a financial advisor or a doctor." I saw it then, the plan behind the fake concern. They weren't just begging, they were setting up a narrative. They wanted me to sound unstable. I'm fine, Jason." Jane up her poor canatrools. "I'm fine, Jason," I said, my voice low but sharp. "The only thing I'm sick of is being treated like your ATM." I closed the door on their faces. But as I turned the lock, I knew this wasn't over. When people like Jason lose access to free money, they don't go quiet, they go dangerous. And sure enough, 2 days later, I got a letter from a law office, notice of concern regarding financial competence. They were trying to declare me unfit to manage my own money. The letter came on a Tuesday morning, a thin white envelope, polite font, cruel intentions, notice of concern regarding financial competence. I read the words twice, then a third time, just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. According to the document, my daughter and her husband had formally requested a legal review of my mental capacity. They wanted to prove that I was too confused to handle my own money. In plain English, they wanted control of my bank accounts. For a long time, I just sat there at my kitchen table, staring at the letter, the same table where I had once written checks for them, planned birthdays, and saved receipts for every dollar I'd sacrificed. And now, those 2 people, the same ones who had called me only ... when they needed money, were trying to paint me as unstable. I laughed. Not the kind of laugh that comes from amusement, but the kind that hides anger sharp enough to cut glass. That afternoon, I drove straight to Mr. Wagner, my old attorney. He'd helped me with my business years ago. A quiet man with sharp eyes and a memory like a vault. When he saw me walk in holding that envelope, he didn't need to ask. He just sighed. Let me guess. Sumper mine a man fine a miserable fort Nactimer spore or some forester suver. Let me guess. Family and money? I nodded. He read through the letter slowly, his brow tightening. They're accusing you of mental incompetence, Robert. That's serious. But it's also a common trick in elder financial abuse cases. They want guardianship, access to your accounts, property, assets. So they want to take everything, I said quietly. So they want to take everything, I said quietly. Yes, he replied, but they won't succeed. Not if we build your case, right? We spent the next 2 hours listing everything I'd done, every transfer, every payment, every message that proved I'd supported them willingly and rationally. Mr. Wagner's assistant scanned my bank statements, my receipts, and even printed screenshots of Jason's messages asking for money. By the time we were done, we had a file thick enough to crush their lies under its weight. Before I left, Mr. Wagner leaned back in his chair. You know, Robert, this isn't just about money anymore. This is about dignity. They want to break you down, to make you doubt yourself. Don't let them. I looked him in the eye. They already took my trust. They're not getting my sanity. When I got home that evening, the house felt heavier, like it knew the war that was about to start. I sat on my porch watching the sunset fade into gray. For the first time, I understood what real betrayal felt like. Not when a stranger cheats you, but when your own blood plots against you with a smile. My phone buzzed Emily. I almost ignored it. But something in me wanted to hear her voice, to see how much of my daughter was left behind that manipulation. Dad, she said, voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed, you need help. Jason and I are just trying to protect you. We love you, love, I said quietly. If this is love, remind me what hate looks like. She started crying. Please just let Jason handle your finances for a while. It's safer that way. Safer for who? I asked. She didn't answer. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time in the dark, listening to the sound of my own breathing, slow, steady, and alive. They could call me crazy, confused, delusional, but I knew one thing for sure. I was finally awake. The next morning, I made a new promise to myself. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. But it wouldn't be fought with anger. It would be fought with proof, patience, and precision. They thought they were hunting an old man. What they didn't know was that I'd been sharpening my mind for this battle long before they were even born. 3 days after the letter arrived, peace became a stranger in my house. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. I stopped answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize, and even when the wind hit the front door, I half expected to see Jason's smug face behind it. But on Thursday morning, something different happened. The doorbell rang once, then twice, sharp and official. When I looked through the peephole, I saw a woman in a gray suit standing on my porch, holding a clipboard. Her smile looked professional, not friendly. Behind her, a white sedan with a government plate idled at the curb. I opened the door just a crack. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," she said politely. "I'm Karen Schultz, a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services. We've received a report that you may be in a vulnerable situation, and we're required to conduct a wellness check." There it was, the next move in Jason and Emily's game. They'd gone from emotional guilt to government paperwork. I stayed calm. "Do you have identification, Ms. Schultz?" She nodded and showed me her badge. It looked real enough. "I see," I said. "And who exactly filed this report?" "I'm afraid that information is confidential," she replied with that same polished smile. "We only want to make sure you're safe and capable of managing your daily life. Safe and capable. In other words, sane. You can come in," I said quietly, "but before you ask anything, I'm calling my attorney. He'll be here in 15 minutes. Her smile faltered. "Just a little." "That's not necessary, sir. This is a routine visit." "Then you won't mind waiting," I said and closed the door halfway. "I Comrade Binder." "Halfway," I called Mr. Wagner immediately. He didn't sound surprised. "They've escalated, Robert. Keep her outside if you can." "I'm on my way." While I waited, Ms. Schultz stood stiffly on my porch, pretending not to be uncomfortable. Through the glass, I watched her glance around, taking mental notes about the house, the lawn, my posture. Every observation would end up in her report. By the time Mr. Wagner's silver Buick pulled into the driveway, I felt more anger than fear. He stepped out, crisp and calm, carrying a leather folder like it was a weapon. "Good morning," he greeted her, flashing his ID as well. "I'm Robert Hayes' attorney." Please explain the purpose of this unannounced visit. Karen hesitated. We've received reports of erratic behavior and possible cognitive decline. Has daughter, Emily Carter, and her husband, Jason? Her silence was answer enough. Ms. Schultz, he continued, my client is fully competent, financially independent, and medically cleared. Unless you have a court order, this visit ends here. Her professional smile returned, tighter now. Sir, I'm just following protocol. If Mr. Hayes refuses cooperation, it could be interpreted as non-compliance. If you continue without due process, Wagner said, it'll be interpreted as harassment. They stared at each other for a few tense seconds, two professionals testing limits. Finally, she relented. Fine. Then perhaps Mr. Hayes would prefer to answer a few general questions in front of his counsel? I nodded. Let's get this over with. We sat on the porch, 3 chairs, 1 truth, and 2 agendas. Kan adjust to 9 to 5 fraver. She began with the easy questions. Do you live alone? Yes. Do you handle your own bills? Every one of them. Do you drive? Every day. Do you take any medications? Only coffee and aspirin? Her pen paused midair. She wasn't getting what she wanted, Mr. Hayes, she continued. Your daughter says you've been isolating yourself, cutting off family contact, and making impulsive financial decisions. Is that true? No, I said, I'm not isolating. I just stopped funding people who confuse love with rent money, mister. Wagner smiled faintly. The social worker didn't. So you did cut off support, she asked. Yes. After realizing my generosity was being exploited. That's not confusion, Ms. Schultz. That's clarity. She wrote something on her clipboard. I could see the careful neutrality on her face, cracking, like she was realizing she'd been sent on a fool's errand. After another 10 minutes of formality, she finally said, Go, Mr. Hayes. I don't see any immediate reason for further concern. I'll close this case after I file my notes, Mr. Wagner nodded. We'll take a copy of your report for our records. She hesitated, then reluctantly agreed. When she left, I turned to Wagner. They're desperate, I said. They won't stop. No, they won't, he agreed. But that was their first trap, and you didn't fall for it. Next time we set our own next hit. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Emily's voice from our last call. We just want to protect you. It was almost funny how easily love turns into leverage when money's involved. At dawn, I made coffee and went through my files again. I organized every transfer I'd ever made to them. Sester War, Urbach Basher's total, labeled and printed. Then I called Wagner. You said we'd set a trap, I told him. Let's do it. The plan was simple. If they wanted to prove I was incompetent, we'd make them show their greed publicly, mister. Wagner arranged a meeting through their lawyer, supposedly to discuss financial guardianship terms. I agreed to attend under one condition: we'd record the conversation legally, with consent on both sides. When the day arrived, we met in a small law office downtown. Emily walked in first, dressed like she was attending a funeral. Jason followed, carrying his fake confidence like cheap cologne. He extended a hand. Robert, glad you could make it. I bet you are, I said flatly. We all sat. The air smelled like expensive coffee and dishonesty. Their lawyer, a slick, silver-haired man, opened the meeting. Mr. Hayes, your family is deeply worried about your decision-making. They'd like to propose a temporary financial guardianship where your daughter can manage your assets for your safety. And what proof do you have that I need that, I asked. The recent termination of support, erratic communication, the incident involving the wellness check. You mean the one your clients initiated? Wagner interrupted. That check, concluded Mr. Hayes, is perfectly capable. The lawyer ignored him. Our goal isn't conflict. It's protection. Jason leaned forward. Look, Robert, we just want to help. You've done so much for us. Let us take care of things for a while. Take care of things, I said quietly. Or take control of them? His jaw tightened. Why are you acting like we're enemies? Because you drew first blood, I said. You lied, excluded me from your wedding, then tried to have me declared unfit. That's not love, that's strategy. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Practiced, perfectly timed, Dad, please. We're just trying to make sure you're safe. Wagner cleared his throat. If that's true, then you won't mind if Mr. Hayes presents a summary of all financial assistance he's provided over the last 3 years. I nodded. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was every receipt, transfer, and message. The total, Sister U. Urbach Basher's, printed in bold on the front page. This, Wagner said, is evidence of long-term financial dependency, not confusion, not incompetence. Exploitation. Jason's composure cracked. That's not fair. We never asked for, you asked every month I cut in for, we never asked for, you asked for month. I cut in, and I gave every month. because I thought love meant sacrifice, but I've learned love without respect is just debt. The room went silent. Sig seta cap abak to caving puncher to cavik. Even their lawyer couldn't meet my eyes. Wagner stood, smoothing his suit jacket. This meeting is over. Any further attempts to interfere with Mr. Hayes's assets will be treated as harassment and reported to the court. As we left, Jason muttered under his breath, "Yo, you'll regret this, old man." I stopped in the doorway and turned back to him. I already did for the past 3 years, but not anymore. That night my house felt lighter. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for years, one I thought I'd share at Emily's wedding. I drank it alone, not in sadness but in celebration. For once, this wasn't punishment. It was peace. 2 days later, Wagner called. "They've withdrawn the guardianship claim," he said. "The social worker's report killed their argument. You're officially in the clear." I exhaled slowly, letting the tension finally leave my body. "So it's over? Legally, yes. Morally?" He paused. "That's your call." After the call, I stepped out to my porch. The sun was setting again, painting the sky orange and gold, the same color as the tie I bought for that wedding I never attended. I smiled a little sadly and whispered to the air, "I guess I finally made the guest list. To my own freedom. For 2 peaceful weeks, I thought the storm had finally passed. No phone calls, no letters, no sudden knocks on the door. I started sleeping again. I even went fishing with an old friend for the first time in years. But peace in my life had always come with an expiration date, and one gray Monday morning it expired again. A thick envelope sat in my mailbox. The sender, Carter and Levinson Family Law. I already knew what it was before I tore it open. Inside, a petition for legal guardianship filed by my daughter Emily Carter and her husband, Jason Carter, claiming I was mentally incompetent to manage my financial affairs. My hands didn't shake when I read it. They burned. They had gone all the way. They were dragging me to court to take my freedom, Mr. Wagner came that afternoon, his face grave but calm. He laid the papers out on my kitchen table, the same table that had witnessed my every humiliation and awakening. "They've built a case," he said, flipping through the pages. 3 witnesses, Jason, Emily, and a neighbor, Mr. Collins across the street. I frowned. "Collins, the same guy who complains when someone parks near his driveway?" Wagner nodded. "They're painting a picture of a confused old man who's paranoid, isolated, and being manipulated by outsiders. They claim you're refusing medical treatment and acting erratically." "Erratically?" I muttered. "You mean installing cameras after they broke into my house?" He sighed. "La faire non furfri misenero desperate," he sighed. "Robert, they're desperate. When greed meets fear, it turns into cruelty." Then he leaned closer. "But here's the good news. We have everything: bank statements, receipts, texts, your medical report, and 2 independent psychiatric evaluations. You're solid. All we need to do is stay calm and let the truth talk." I nodded. Sapericomiskina Lerman defect. "They want to humiliate me in public? Fine, let's make sure everyone hears what they've done." Wagner smiled for the first time that day. "Then let's give them a courtroom silent." The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. Family court. Small room. 1 judge, 2 lawyers, and too many ghosts from my past. When I walked in, the air felt heavy, the kind of heaviness that lives between betrayal and consequence. Emily sat on one side of the room, her face pale and tear-streaked. Jason sat beside her, expression cold, calculating. He'd dressed for war, navy suit, polished shoes, fake humility. They didn't look at me. The judge, Honorable Mary Dalton, entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. She looked like someone who'd seen every kind of family betrayal imaginable. "This court will now hear the case of Carter versus Hayes regarding the petition for legal guardianship," she announced. Jason's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, my clients have reason to believe Mr. Robert Hayes is experiencing cognitive decline. He has made irrational financial decisions, cut off family support, and demonstrated signs of paranoia and confusion. We seek temporary guardianship to protect him and his estate from further harm. Protect me from my own money." I felt Mr. Wagner's reassuring hand on my shoulder. It was time to let them dig their own hole. Emily went first. Her tears were perfectly timed, her words memorized. "Dad has always been kind and generous," she began softly. "But lately he's changed. He yells, isolates himself, refuses to see us. He canceled all his financial transfers without warning. He doesn't trust anyone anymore. I'm scared for him." Her voice broke on cue. Even the bailiff looked uncomfortable. Then came Jason, confident, smooth, well-rehearsed. "Your Honor, I've tried to help Robert. I handled his bills for years. But now he refuses to listen to reason. He's being manipulated by outsiders. We just want to make sure he's taken care of properly." I almost laughed. "Manipulated by outsiders?" The only manipulation in my life had their fingerprints all over it. When their lawyer rested his case, the judge turned to Wagner. Mr. Wagner, your response? He stood slowly, adjusted his glasses, and spoke with that calm precision only experience gives. Your Honor, this case isn't about confusion, it's about control. My client's only crime is refusing to finance two adults who have mistaken generosity for obligation. He placed a thick folder on the table. In this file are 3 years of financial records, proof that Mr. Hayes paid their rent, bills, and personal expenses totaling Sester Yor, Arbeck Bashers, all voluntary, all traceable, no irrational spending, no confusion, just kindness. He let the number hang in the air. What's irrational, Wagner continued, is expecting that kindness to be permanent. He turned to the judge. We will now call our first witness, Dr. Simmons, licensed psychiatrist, to testify on Mr. Hayes's mental capacity. Truth witnessed. Dr. Simmons took the stand, a calm man in his 50s with wireframe glasses and a voice like reason itself. I performed a comprehensive mental evaluation of Mr. Hayes last week, he said. Cognitive, emotional, and decision-making tests. His results were not only normal, they were above average for his age. There is no sign of dementia, paranoia, or cognitive decline. Jason's lawyer frowned. Doctor, could isolation itself indicate mental instability? Not necessarily. Isolation is self-protection. Especially after sustained emotional or financial abuse. The room went still. The word abuse hung in the air like a blade. Next, Wagner called a neighbor, Linda Murray, a retired nurse who lived 2 houses down. Mr. Hayes is sharp as a tack, she said proudly. He fixes his own gutters, drives himself everywhere, keeps his lawn better than anyone on the blocks. The only thing wrong with him is that he raised 2 people who don't deserve him. Laughter rippled through the courtroom before the judge banged her gavel. Even she couldn't hide a small smile. Finally, it was my turn. I took the stand, swore my oath, and faced my daughter. For a moment, my heart faltered. I saw the little girl she once was, holding my hand at the fair, loving with ice cream on her nose. But the woman in front of me wasn't that child anymore. She was someone who had traded her father for a checkbook. Mr. Wagner asked the first question. Mr. Hayes, why did you stop supporting your daughter financially? Because I realized I was financing disrespect, I said clearly. They excluded me from their wedding and called me confused when I stopped paying their rent. That's not love. That's dependency. Did you ever threaten them? No. The only thing I ever threatened was their comfort. How do you respond to claims that you're being manipulated? I am, I said, pausing long enough to make them look hopeful, but not by outsiders, by family. The room went silent. Even the judge's pen stopped moving. Your Honor, I said, turning to face her, if refusing to fund people who use me means I'm incompetent, then maybe sanity isn't worth much these days. When I finished, Wagner sat back, arms folded, calm as a man who already knew he'd won. Jason's lawyer tried to recover, questioning my emotional instability, but every answer I gave was calmed, precise, and grounded. Their case began to crumble in real time. Finally, Judge Dalton spoke. I've heard enough, she said, removing her glasses. This court has reviewed all evidence, including the psychiatric report, bank records, and witness statements. She looked directly at Emily. It is my judgment that Mr. Robert Hayes is fully competent, mentally stable, and capable of managing his own affairs. The petition for guardianship is hereby denied. Then her tone hardened. Furthermore, this court finds concerning evidence of attempted financial coercion by the petitioners. Be advised, continued harassment may lead to criminal investigation. The room fell into courtroom silence, that heavy, echoing quiet that only happens when truth lands like a hammer. Jason's jaw clenched, Emily's face collapsed into her hands, and for the first time in years, I felt no guilt, no fear, only clarity. As we walked out, Wagner whispered, you didn't just win, Robert, you exposed them. Outside the courthouse, sunlight hit my face like a reward. The reporters ignored us. This wasn't headline drama, just another quiet war inside a family. But to me, it was the biggest victory of my life. Emily tried to call my name as we passed, voice cracking, Dad, please. I turned once. You had your chance, Emily. You traded trust for power, and now you have neither. She didn't follow me. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee and no regrets. The same house that had once felt haunted by obligation now felt free, no buzzing phone, no guilt, just the sound of peace and the whisper of dignity coming home. The morning after the trial, the house was too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that makes you lonely, the kind that makes you think. Sunlight slipped through the blinds and stretched across my dining table, landing on the same spot where I'd once stacked overdue bills and bank receipts. Now the table was empty for the first time in years, so was my mind. I brewed coffee, black, no sugar, and sat down with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. I didn't plan to write a letter, but somehow my hand found the words before my brain caught up. At the top of the page, I wrote, to my daughter, Emily. The words looked strange, distant, like they belonged to someone else's life. Still, I kept writing. Emily, I don't know if this letter will ever reach you. Maybe you'll hear these words someday, maybe not. I'm not writing it for you to read. I'm writing it because some things need to be said, even if no one's listening. When you were a little girl, you used to tell me, Dad, when I grow up, I'll take care of you. I believed you, I believed every word, but somewhere along the way, taking care of me turned into taking from me. You didn't notice when the giving stopped being love and started becoming survival. You made me question my worth as a father. Not because you hated me, but because you didn't need me anymore once my money ran out. And that's the cruelest kind of forgetting. I paused. My coffee had gone cold, but the memories burned hotter than ever. The day of the trial replayed in my mind, her trembling voice, those tears that once would have broken me, but not this time. This time they only reminded me how well she'd learned to act. I turned back to the letter. Do you know what hurt the most, Emily? Not the lies, not the greed. But hearing you tell a judge that I was confused. You, of all people, the child who once called me her hero, telling the world I was broken. You didn't just question my mind, you erased my dignity. Still, I can't hate you. Because hate would mean you still matter enough to poison me, and I've had enough poison for one lifetime. I stopped writing for a minute and looked out the window. The oak tree outside had started to bloom again. Spring, stubborn and faithful as always. Life doesn't wait for apologies, it just grows around the pain, I continued. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. You'll never know how hard it is to love someone who sees you as a resource. But I hope someday you do, not out of cruelty, but so you understand what you did. You'll learn that money can buy comfort, but not connection. You'll learn that silence from someone who used to care is louder than any argument. And maybe then you'll think of me, not as the man you sued, but as the father who never stopped hoping you'd remember who you were. My hand trembled a little when I signed my name, Dad, not Robert, not Mr. Hayes, just Dad. The word still meant something to me, even if it didn't to her. I folded the paper neatly and slipped it into an envelope. For a few seconds, I just stared at it, the way you stare at a photograph before you throw it away. I could have mailed it. Her address was still saved in my drawer, written on dozens of old envelopes from years when she actually wrote back. But I didn't. Instead, I took the letter to the fireplace, struck a match, and watched the edges curl and blacken. The paper twisted in the flame, the ink fading into gray smoke, and in that quiet moment, I realized I wasn't burning a message. I was burning permission for her to live rent-free in my mind. The smoke rose through the chimney, out into the cold morning air, carrying every apology I was done waiting for. I poured myself another cup of coffee and opened the window. The fresh breeze filled the room, replacing the old smell of fear and obligation with something new, freedom. On the counter, my phone buzzed, a new message, Emily, missed call. I stared at it for a while, then let it fade into the lock screen. She'd probably call again tomorrow, or maybe she'd stop. Either way, I didn't owe her an answer anymore. That afternoon, I drove out to the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the sky like a mirror. I sat on the dock with my shoes off, feet dangling above the surface, and thought about everything I'd lost. Money could be earned again, respect could be rebuilt, but trust, once broken, it doesn't grow back. It leaves scars in the shape of lessons. And maybe that's what I had now, not a family, not forgiveness, but clarity. I'd spent half my life paying bills for other people, thinking it made me a good man. Turns out, to Tazin Axtreverns. Turns out, being a good man doesn't mean giving everything away. It means knowing when to stop. The sun sank low behind the trees, painting the lake gold. I closed my eyes and whispered the only prayer I still believed in, thank you for finally teaching me how to let go. When I got home that evening, I placed a fresh piece of paper in my desk drawer, blanca. No names, no pain, that's how I wanted my future to look. Unwritten, clean, and mine again. It's strange how quiet victory can be. No applause, no confetti, Pepin. Just the soft hum of an old refrigerator and the sound of your own breathing calm for the first time in years. It's been 6 months since the courtroom. 6 months since I walked out of that building and decided I would never walk backward again. The seasons have changed, and so have I. The grass out front finally grew the way it was supposed to, wild and free like me. The house that once felt too big for one man now fits perfectly around my silence. Some nights I still hear the echo of old conversations, but they don't sting anymore. They're just Memories that know when to stop knocking. I started teaching again, not in a classroom, but at the community center downtown. They asked if I could help older men learn basic budgeting, something about retirement literacy. I laughed when they offered. If only they knew how much tuition I paid to learn that lesson. Every Tuesday, a handful of men show up, quiet, tired faces, the kind that know too much about giving and too little about keeping. We talk about money, yes, but mostly we talk about respect, about not apologizing for saying no. One man, Tom, told me he hadn't spoken to his son in 3 years because of money fights. He asked, "Do you ever stop loving them?" I thought for a moment and said, no. But you stop paying for the version of them that doesn't love you back. He smiled like I'd handed him a map out of hell. Maybe that's what freedom is, not escaping people, but escaping the version of yourself that kept trying to fix them. One rainy morning, I found a letter in my mailbox, handwritten. The return address said E. Carter. For a long moment, I just stood there in the doorway, the rain dripping off my coat. I thought about all the things she might have written, anger, guilt, maybe even love. Then I thought about that letter I'd burned months ago, the one she'd never read. I smiled. Maybe this was the universe finishing a conversation I'd already ended. I didn't open it, not out of spite, out of peace. I slid it into a drawer beside the ashes of my own letter, the one I'd never sent, and closed it. Some things don't need answers, they just need endings. After that day, I started fixing up the house. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to make it mine again. I repainted the porch, hung new curtains, even bought a record player, the old kind that crackles before the music starts. Every night I sit outside with a cup of coffee and let old jazz songs fill the air. The kind my wife used to hum before cancer took her off her. Back when Emily was still little enough to dance on my shoes. Those memories don't hurt anymore. They remind me who I was and who I've found again. The world hasn't changed much, but I have. I used to measure my worth by how much I gave away. Now I measure it by how peacefully I sleep. And these days, I sleep just fine. Last month, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, I saw Jason standing there. No suit, no swagger, just a man who looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt thick with all the words we'd both avoided. Finally, he said quietly, Emily wanted to come, but she thought you'd slam the door. I didn't answer, She wanted me to tell you she's sorry for everything. We lost a lot, Robert, money, friends. But what she misses most is you. I looked at him, the man who once tried to destroy me, and saw something new in his eyes. Defeat, maybe even regret. You came all this way, I said slowly. Was it for forgiveness? He shook his head. No, just to say you were right about everything. I nodded, not with pride, but with peace. You don't need my forgiveness, Jason. You need to forgive yourself. That's the harder part. He stood there for another moment, then turned to leave. As he reached the gate, I called out, tell her I'm okay. He nodded once and walked away. When the door closed, I didn't feel anger, just a quiet finality, like the end of a long, painful song. Tonight, I'm back on the porch. The air smells like rain, the kind that cleans everything it touches. Somewhere down the street, kids are laughing. A dog barks. A car radio hums softly from a driveway. It's funny, for so long I thought freedom would sound like silence, but it doesn't. It sounds like life moving on without you having to control it. And I close my eyes and let the night fill with small noises. The dot-not kind you miss when you're too busy surviving someone else's expectations. The sound of wind through the trees, the distant train, the creak of the old porch swing, that's freedom. That's what peace sounds like when it finally finds its home. Before going inside, I glance at the mailbox one more time. Empty. And for once, that emptiness feels perfect. No bills, no letters, no reminders of who I used to be. I pick up my journal, the one I started after the trial, and write my last note for the night. They wanted my money. They took my trust, but they gave me something better, myself. I close the journal, smile, and whisper to the quiet night, echo. Freedom doesn't shout, it breathes. The record player crackles to life inside, and the first notes of an old Louis Armstrong song drift through the open window. What a wonderful world, and for the first time in a very long time, I believe it.